I want to call the May 22nd, 2025 meeting of the Charter Revision Commission to order. The first order of business is to approve the minutes of our April 16th, 2025 meeting.
So moved.
Denise has moved to accept or approve the minutes of the April 16th meeting. Are there any corrections or comments or anything?
Quick comment, this is a different minute format. Jessica gave a note to say that she took some continuing education sort of on minutes. She is obviously doing a lot of minutes over these last few months. So this is a different style. She gave me a heads up and just audibly giving you a heads up that it's different, a little more truncated than previous minutes. I think I read it over, I think it covers the things that we need, but just lifting that up for everyone.
Thank
Go to the
you.
whole.
It looks good to me. Anyone else have any comments? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye. I'm abstaining
One abstention. I had to miss it first.
since I wasn't here.
Okay. All right, so tonight, our primary reason for being is the discussion on the form of annual town meeting. And what we had said, and what we said then and what we want to do now doesn't have to match. But our goal was to make a decision. And whether that decision is tonight or next week, because we're meeting again next week, is really, I think, up to us to discuss right now. I sent along a packet of information that we have the survey results. The packet of information I sent, my primary purpose was to remind us that we actually started talking about not representative town meeting, but the annual form of town meeting back in February 2024. And it's been on our agenda 9 times since February of last year. That we had the meeting at the library on the March 31st of this year. So we have been talking about it for a while, and I also included the meeting minutes to those meetings so we can familiarize ourselves. Just remember that this has been going on a long time.
Thank you for doing that, because there was actually some stuff from the early meetings that the refresher was helpful.
Yes.
Reminders of things.
Yes, it reminded me of things too. One of the things that I didn't include, because after I did it, I thought, why is my perception of something any more important than anybody else's? I have gone through all the prior meetings and I have notes of what people said. Obviously, they're not exact transcripts, but I have them, and I decided not to send them out to you folks because I thought that's what I heard them say, and I don't want that to appear any more important, at least to the public. But if anybody, I'm ready to refresh our memories on things. You know what I mean? I just didn't feel it was appropriate for me to send just my notes out, but I have them all for all the meetings. So I think tonight it's, looking at the other things I sent out was what the work of the other charter group did to remind ourselves what other towns do. That chart that we did that compared what work each representative town meeting, open town meeting, or Australian ballot could do. And then I have the emails that we received to Brattleboro or charter@brattleboro.gov. So I tried to put together everything that we had looked at, so we have it. We don't necessarily use it, but it reminded us we actually been doing a lot on this. So I think one of the questions for us too tonight is, do we need anything else after we have a conversation? Is there anything else we need to make a decision? Do we have it all? Do we need anything else? So I don't know if, obviously we have the survey, if we want to look at the survey first, or do we want to have a conversation on how we think this should go? I don't know where people want to go with this, because we have a lot of opinions on a lot of things.
Can I just make a suggestion that we approach this with the idea that we will make some sort of decision that gives us some guidance on how to move forward, but we don't need to necessarily come up with an entire structure for how this will look, because I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it seems like a lot of feedback wants us to explore a hybrid option.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because, and what I've been saying to people is, wherever we decide to go, it's not cut and dry, like there's gonna be all these things, layers that go along with it. So I totally agree with you. Because it would be nice if we could just say, this is what we're gonna do and not have to worry about anything else, but we
No.
do.
But I agree with you. The hybrid seemed to be of some kind. Even people who wanted Australian ballot wanted meetings forums to discuss
Mhm.
what was gonna happen before the vote.
Right.
And
So do we wanna just jump right in and maybe look at the survey right now? And then we can go back, and let's look at the survey. And then we can sort of see what the survey says, but then we can remember what people told us back in February as well. In February 2024, because there's context to all of this. And one of the things that,
March 31st.
yes, March 31st, February. One of the things that I've been thinking about just in general, then Maya, you can discuss the survey results, is that whatever decision we make, we have to remember we're not just making it for now, it's a decision that's gonna go into the, it's gonna be future. And I personally don't wanna make a decision based on the reaction to one event that occurred today. You know what I'm saying? So I think we have to sort of look at everything that we have in a huge, big context and figure it out. So do we wanna go, Maya, over this survey? We can talk about that? And
Sure.
maybe Seth can put it up so that the people in the audience. And just a reminder that this went out on March 31st, and I think it ran through April 25th.
April 25th, the
Yes.
night of April 25th.
Yeah. And we have 260 people who filled it out.
Yes. Of course, everybody who answered was a Brattleboro resident, because we didn't let anybody who wasn't go any further than just saying no. I'm not a resident.
You can sit over there too, David, if you need to. Anyone can move a chair however they want.
So, the breakdown by district is interesting, because District 7 had the fewest number of respondents, the lowest percentage. District 8 was in the middle, and District 9 had the most responses.
Do we want to say, so everyone knows what we're talking about, like there's 77 people in District 7
Yeah.
responded, which was
29.62% of the respondents. District 8 had 88 people respond, which was 33.85%. And District 9 had 36.54% of the responses, and they were 95.
Does it say what percentage of the district responded?
You mean how many registered voters were in the district? You didn't have to be a registered voter to respond to the survey.
I'm sure you could
I just
divide
think-
this by however many residents there are.
Residents.
You could,
Number,
yeah.
But we
very
didn't ask
small.
that. I mean, I didn't input that information into the
We
survey.
could have done the math, but if you think about it, if there are 11,000 people that live in the town of Brattleboro and 260 people responded,
That's pretty small.
But compared to the response we've gotten to almost everything else we've done, it's pretty large.
yeah, yes,
Yes.
exactly.
It's large, but it's small.
That's small.
in comparison. So, oops, it's the same page. Okay. We asked the question,
Yeah, where-
go to the next slide. Okay. We asked,
This is open town versus representative.
yes,
Right, so just to, for those who maybe didn't take the survey, don't remember, it's sort of paired voting where you're ranking two choices against each other.
Yeah.
And so it's not ranked choice voting where you're comparing all three at once.
So this is the
So, wait.
first, this is the first.
I know,
question.
my,
Mine's very different.
I did it back and front, and now I can't figure out how to flip my pages.
It's the one with the
It's
blue
us.
and the green.
Yeah.
No, it's just blue and
I
green.
can't see the details, but it looks like green won me.
Yeah, green
Yeah.
is open
Green is
town
open
meeting
town meeting.
and blue is RTM.
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna-
why don't I have that page in my,
I can
thing.
read it. It's by each band is
it's by district.
And district, the first
First-
one is District 7.
And that's
It-
about 75%.
It's,
Is that right?
and in
71.
District 7, 57 people said they wanted open town meeting, which is 74% of the people surveyed, who took the survey. And then 20 people, or roughly 26% of the people surveyed said they want representative town meeting. That's in District 7. Then in District 8, 54 people said they want open town meeting, which is about 62%. And then 33 people, which is around 38%, said they want representative town meeting. And then District 9, 62 people responded that they wanted open town meeting, which is around 67%. And then 31% said they want, or 31 people, I'm sorry, said they wanted representative town meeting, which is around 33%. So basically,
The majority of
Yeah,
people who responded in all the districts.
right, 173 people between the three districts said they wanted open town meeting, where 84 people said they wanted representative town meeting. So the majority of the green ones, it's a 2-to-1, people wanted open town meeting over
Yeah.
representative town meeting. And I think you might have the next one.
Yeah, I have the next one. So this was a comparison of representative town meeting and Australian ballot. In District 7,
That's the green.
15 people responded that they wanted representative town meeting. And 61 people, which is 35%, said they wanted, of the total respondents, said they wanted Australian ballot. In District 2,
Which is blue.
which is District 8 now, formerly District 2. I'm in District 8 and I can't remember that I'm not District 2 anymore. So 34 people responded, which is about 42.5%. And 52 people said they wanted Australian ballot, which was almost 30% of the total from District 8. In District 9,
Which is yellow.
31 people responded that they wanted representative town meeting. And that's just about 39%. It's 38.75. And if you, it's on the town website.
I'm just trying to make sense of it right now.
If you
I can
wanted.
go on my laptop, yeah.
If-
Yeah, I can go there.
This particular chart ended up flipping where the question versus the bars are different than the last question, but I think the rest continue with the sort of
Yeah,
more
it's-
side by
it was-
side. This is
it was-
the only one that seems to be
That's
like,
what was confusing
Yeah.
about.
which, how are we comparing and that sort of thing, but,
It's just the way SurveyMonkey decided to do it. I'm not sure exactly why.
So basically, this is showing a slight preference for RTM over Australian ballot in districts 8 and 9, and the opposite in district 7.
Yes.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
It's showing a preference for Australian ballot.
No, for RTM in 2 of the districts, and a preference for Australian ballot in district 7.
Because the green line is District 7, the blue lines are District 8, and the yellow lines are District 9.
But if you look
So-
at the percentages, it's, of all the respondents, if you look at the total, 80 people of those who responded wanted, representative town meeting, and 174 of people who responded wanted, Australian ballot.
so scroll down just a little for the chart underneath.
Yeah.
This is where the
That's
count
total.
is.
Yeah.
Versus, yeah. So, and that's, if you're closer, so then this would be representative town meeting, 80 people said that, Australian ballot, 174. So, for this question, the comparison of representative versus Australian ballot, across the district, all the respondents, 174 said Australian ballot.
Okay, so this isn't showing what I,
Well, but
is it?
It's very confusing. I looked at this one like 100 times
Yeah.
because it was making my head not
Oh,
understand
no,
it.
it is, yeah. But it's still showing overall about the same ratio of people who want something other than RTM.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would
Yes.
agree with that.
Yes.
I mean, it's interesting to note the breakdown by district, but it's not necessarily,
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the total number of registered voters in Brattleboro? Approximately.
Around 9,000.
9,000, yeah.
So these numbers, I mean, they're tiny numbers.
Yes,
But the number of registered voters and the number of people that actually vote in the March elections are different as well.
And what is the,
they
Here,
said
do you remember?
it was a,
25,
Couple of
3,000
Yeah,
yeah,
Less than 3,000.
less than 3,000.
voted in March.
but we don't know if these are even the same people.
Exactly.
we don't.
Exactly.
Because this did not require to
Yeah.
be a registered voter. This could be anyone.
No, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But I hope this isn't the
Oh.
total basis of the decision.
Oh, no, we're just
We have a
looking
lot
at.
of other.
Yeah,
We'll go through this again and
We
then
could
we'll,
roll the dice and come up with an answer.
oh, no, we're gonna go through the rest of this and then we'll recap
There's
all the stuff.
other documents if you want that has like past meeting
Do we wanna
minutes
go
as
to
well.
the
I found it on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, maybe just, so this was the total number of people who participated in the survey was how many?
260,
And how many
Two.
RTM members are there?
140 something.
Okay, so
2,
it's-
48.
Yeah.
It's more than,
Yeah.
it's more than that,
Mhm.
certainly.
Okay.
so in the next, the last question was, and you might wanna go up so you see the percentage, the
I think she
totals.
needs to go down.
The
Like,
numbers down,
What
whatever,
I'm looking at before.
up, down, there. So this was a question, of if you had a choice between open town meeting and Australian ballot, which one would you prefer?
104.
And we had, in District 7, there were 28 people that wanted open town meeting, that's about 27%. And 48 wanted, Australian ballot, which is 32%. In District 8, 37 people wanted open town meeting, and 48 wanted Australian ballot. And that's almost 36% and 32% respectively. And in District 9, there were 39 people who wanted open town meeting and 53 who wanted Australian ballot. And so those percentages were 37.5 and 35.5. So that was a little bit close. In total, 104 people said they wanted open town meeting, and 149 said Australian ballot, and that's 41% versus 59%. So I think that the most interesting thing, and there are copies, I believe, of, we asked the open-ended question of, do you have anything else you want to say? And we got 130 responses, which is, I was just amazed at the number of people
Oh,
who wrote.
I only had 42 comments, didn't I not print them off? How many comments?
7 pages.
Yeah.
That's what I have, but isn't it only 42 comments?
No, they're numbered by district. So there's 36 from one district.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
yes, okay, okay.
They're
Yep, yep,
sorted
yep.
by district.
Oh, yeah, you're right, I'm sorry, forget what I just said.
So I think the comments are quite interesting. And that's one of the places where I got the idea that a lot of people kind of wanted some kind of hybrid thing. And if we, one of the big comments we got about RTM was that they wanted more, if we kept RTM, they wanted to make sure that people knew who they were voting for. I mean, that was one of the big complaints, I think, is that people didn't know people on the ballot. And there were some interesting suggestions about ways to remedy that. But I think the majority of people want to see, are interested in something that would provide more broad input from the public and more opportunity for people to have a say. And that was, I think, something hybrid where everybody could vote, but you had forums or informational meetings beforehand, or some kind of split situation where certain things were voted on by Australian ballot and certain things were voted on either by open town meeting or a modified form of RTM. I don't know whether anybody else got a different impression.
I think that the comments sort of run the gamut, but they seem to be in similar proportions to what we got on the survey questions, which is that a lot of people are unhappy with RTM for a variety of reasons. But so there's a lot of interest in sort of opening up the democratic process to more people, but also concerns about doing that in a way that's not unwieldy, because that's one of the criticisms of RTM as well, is that it's turned into this sort of, very long, complicated process. So it seems to be sort of a lot of.
Yeah, some people were concerned that if we went to open town meeting, it would be even longer.
Yeah, there were several comments asking for a mayor. We've already said we're not doing that. There were comments saying we should be a city. They tried that 100 years ago and it didn't work. So we're not going to be addressing any of those things.
And just one thing to go to Andy's point, where we're hoping just the survey isn't the only thing we're looking at.
Yeah.
And that's why, I don't know if you would come in, Andy, yet, but we have been talking about this since February 2024. And I personally don't want us to lose sight of the comments that we heard.
Sure.
And I mean, I was the first person to talk about Australian ballot back in December. But until I brought it up in December, it didn't really come up. in any of our conversations. So I just want us to remember that, and this is what's gonna be, this is like what's challenging, like, for me, in my mind, is, you know, you hear what we heard from February until March, February 2024 until March 30th, 31st. There are different opinions that have come up, especially because for Australian ballot, and a lot of that is in reaction to how people experienced the special representative town meeting we had in December, and experienced the first representative town meeting, you know, when we rejected the budget. So for me, it's how do we make a decision looking at the long term and not making a decision in reaction to something that we're all gonna regret a year from now. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, looking at what we heard in February of 2024, you know, all the eight meetings that we heard from things, and that what we're hearing now. Because a lot, still we're hearing from people who there are people in this survey, they're telling us they like representative town meeting, but they want it modified. And there are people in the survey that are saying, in the comments, that are saying we like open town meeting. You know, obviously, you didn't have to put a comment in. There could have been 100 more people that would have said, I want Australian ballot. You know what I mean? So the comments themselves, it wasn't that you had to give us a comment. Just like people don't have to come to a meeting and tell us something. So for me, it's how do we sift through hearing what we're hearing and when we heard it to come out with something that is gonna be in our charter for, hopefully, we won't have to do it over 2 years from now because everyone's realized we made a big mistake and we really didn't want what we said we wanted because we tried it and it didn't work. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I think it's helpful that you've urged us to be cautious about having the last loud thing we've heard drive this. I think it's also really important that we not do a tick mark process of, you know, we also, one thing we haven't mentioned, we've been focusing a lot on the survey results. There were a lot of comments to the survey. There also have been a lot of emails, and there's been a lot of participation in our meetings over these, you know, almost a year and a half now. And so there's a tremendous amount of input. And I think the passage of time piece is something for us to keep in perspective. I think it's also important for us to keep in perspective, like what we've learned in our work, and the way in which we haven't heard, you know, one single desired outcome from the community. We've heard a lot of input from the community, but it's not just one thing. And so I think it's important that we assimilate that rather than trying to have a methodology that leads us to a decision. We assimilate all of these various forms of input that we've received, and ultimately together and sort of on the way to that individually come to a place of like where we land. And yeah, I'll stop
I think it's
there.
also important for us to keep in mind, well, not for us, but also just important to note that our decision is not the final decision.
Exactly.
It will be voted on by the town, it will go to the legislature, it will be voted, it'll be, you know, signed or vetoed by the governor.
Yeah.
There are a lot of checks and balances,
Yep.
like, you know, I feel like there's been a little bit of this thought that we're sort of, we've got an agenda and we're gonna do this thing and force people into a model that they don't want, but the town is gonna get to vote on this.
Absolutely.
yes.
And that, I think we discussed, I forget if it was the last meeting, the one before that it's really important that be a townwide vote
Yes.
and not an RTM vote, because it's important that everyone gets their input on what that model is.
Agreed.
I have Andy first and then Christina. Andy, do you want to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting that this process is going through a sort of a stormy time in the town. We've had some very hot button issues with the budget, with public safety, an extra town meeting, actually 2 extra town meetings. Town meeting, RTM is becoming a full-time job slowly. And I wonder if this survey had gone out in a time when taxes were going down and we weren't having hot button issues. And this is actually one of the reasons I did a deep dive into the history. And one of the goals of RTM was to level out and have a consistent participation in town politics, because one of the big issues was the airport in Hinsdale. One of the last town meetings, open town meetings, was, depending on who you believe, close to 1,000 people stuffing into a room to shout down the airport. And there was a decision made, the town, liked the idea of having a smaller group of people that made more of a commitment. The other thing that I wanted to say about it was, as much as there's criticism of it right now, I have to ask myself, what didn't work about RTM? And I can't really find out we're not really the legislature. The whole question about, well, I want to know who my representatives are. The select board is our legislature in this town by law. We're kind of the RTM, I say we because I am a District 9 rep, we're kind of a stand-in for the public. We're kind of like a group of people that have raised our hands, stepped forward and said, I will make a multi-year commitment to following the issues of the town. But we're the public. And I think that one of the misunderstandings is I want to vote for people who will vote the way I feel. But we don't have parties in this town. We don't go in there as a progressive or a Republican or a Democrat. I may, an individual say, I want Andy on there, but I may feel one way about solid waste and a different way about taxes and human services. How are they going to support me if they knew more about me? Because I think what unifies us on RTM is we all care more about the town than we care about any one particular political philosophy. And I think that's one of the things I'm frustrated by, is that we're looking at this through a lens of a stormy period in the town of Brattleboro, where people have had to make some hard choices about money and public safety, and we're trying to go forward with sustainability and public safety and controlling the budget, and RTM has had its hand in all of those things, and I have to ask the question, what hasn't worked about RTM? So that's all I'll say for right now.
Andy, do you think it's the name that's a misnomer?
I think, well, when we had the steering committee, there were people who wanted to turn the RTM. It wasn't really our mission as a steering committee, so that was a very interesting experiment. I called it the steering committee. But some people wanted it to be more like a legislature, as it is in some towns in Massachusetts, where it's a year-round. The RTM works with the select board to write the warrant. There is a standing warrant committee of the representative town meeting, and it is the legislature of the town in some towns in Massachusetts, but it isn't by state law in Vermont. We have our own hybrid. And the more I've thought about it, I think it's really more about, so the question, I have thought about that instead of calling it representative, but it's more about understanding what we represent. I think we represent the interests of the town as citizens, and we're not like, I represent, my corner of Brattleboro, and this person over here represents their corner of Brattleboro, and the people I have a responsibility to the people who put me here, that kind of thing. We don't fundraise, we don't have any kind of, I think that we pretty much go in there all trying to make the right decision, and because we're an opinionated town, we hear a lot of views, and that's in the charter, that RTM is supposed to be a source of new ideas. I can't remember the exact phraseology, but it's new ideas, discussion. I think the select board got a lot of feedback from RTM this year. It was an important conversation we had for that day. Anyway, so maybe the name could be changed. That would be an interesting thing. The, Brattleboro Representative Town Meeting, Advisory Town Meeting or something like that. So, but we do actually approve bonds, vote the budget up or down. So we're not just advisory.
Right.
So anyway, that's enough. I've said it. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Is there anybody online? Nobody's raised,
Two people.
No one's raised their hands.
but nobody's raised.
Christina did it.
Okay.
Christina. Now, everybody say your name for the camera. I'm realizing the people on TV don't know who you are.
I'm Andy Davis.
Oh, yeah. You already got it. I think Christina, were you gonna say something?
The back of Christina Sheanye's head. So just picking up on some of the words that I heard tonight, I was wondering if each of you could come up with a number of how many people would show up at an open town meeting for this to have actually increased democracy and been a good idea. And what is that number? And based on what our civic engagement looks like at the moment, what are the chances of that number being reached? I'm curious what that number is and what room would fit those people.
I'm not going to give a number, but I will just say that a lot of our discussions, especially before the more recent RTM, the special RTM, and the one this past March, that there was a lot of discussion about the fact that there is not full engagement in RTM. It is not representing a consistent level of people, and that it's basically just creating extra barriers, but anyone who wants to participate at this point is effectively can. This most recent election was the first competitive election we've had in maybe 20 years. So, again, trying not to look at it from this sort of charged moment, the recent history shows that there might not be that much of a difference in the level of engagement, but maybe there are people that aren't participating because it seems complicated. So, I'm not saying that you wouldn't necessarily get any more, but I think that this fear that 1,500 people are going to show up and we're not going to know where to put them is unfounded.
And I think if you look at the school district, I mean, it's a little different. There's different levels of people get more into the town stuff than we do get into school stuff. But since the merger, there are 4 towns, and like 100 and something people showed up to vote on a $65 million budget. I think there were 60 something people, even less, from Brattleboro. And that's open, anybody can come. But I remember the first meeting, I think it was the first meeting of the new school district. The gym was packed because there was an item on the agenda. It was something about like a diversity.
It was the artificial turf.
No, this is
Was it the first?
It was like
It was the diversity.
There was a
thing.
diversity question, and the gym was packed. And I'm like, this is great. Now it's the first big thing, and then the next year you went back and there was like 100 of us sitting there. You know what I mean? So I really do.
Or less.
Or less. So, okay,
And if there is a charge issue in the town, I guess why not let everyone participate? What's the harm in that, really?
Yeah, maybe just picking up on that, I think a more democratic.
Can you identify?
Sorry, Tom Grasso, I'm a Brattleboro resident, District 9 representative, town meeting member, my second time. I do think that, whatever system we have in place has to be able to be responsive to when we do have crises. So if RTM isn't working now because of the crises that we're having, then it's not going to work in times of calm. And I was on RTM many years ago when I first moved here when there were vacant seats. And I think we all know that most of the time there's vacant seats. And I don't think that's, I think it's partly because people find it an onerous process to participate, and it sort of restricts people's ability to actually have a say. So, what I was recommending was like if we have informational meetings where people can learn about what's going on, they can have their say if they want to have their say, but then everybody who's a voter has a chance to really express their opinion by voting. And I think that's probably the most democratic thing, and it'll resolve the issues by vote, not by how many people decide to show up at a meeting. because I agree, an open meeting for Brattleboro is unrealistic. It doesn't solve the problem, I don't think. So, and I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I think ultimately you're right. You're making a recommendation to the town that all town voters are going to make, and then that's going to go to the legislature. So, I do think it's worth considering it. I don't think it's just because we've had problems in the last 6 months. I think this is an issue that's been percolating for a while, and I think what's happened now is that people are really paying attention to it because of some of the controversies. And I have to say the last 2 RTMs have been not a pleasant experience at all. It's not been a discussion. It's been this sort of vitriolic debate, one side versus the other, and I don't think that's good for the town either. I think the town's culture is really important, and we need to preserve a sense of community here, and it doesn't feel like that as much because of the vitriol that's happening. So.
Yeah, I was gonna give Christina a number. She asked each of us to come up with a number. I'm gonna say that if we get 200, right now RTM is 140 something. I think if we got 200 people, that would be a lot. Especially because I think open town meeting would last even longer than RGM, unfortunately. I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know if anybody else has a number before we go to David.
I don't feel like I've been here long enough to make a guess. 8 years isn't long enough. But yeah, I don't think there'd be a huge turnout.
Peter?
I think it'll vary. I think by not having a cap on it, there'll be years when it might be hundreds of people in the room, like what Kate described in the school district meeting. There might be times when many more people from the community show up, and then years when it may only be 100 people in the room. I have an opinion I'd like to share. Like I have a personal conclusion that I've arrived at that's not a final, like, I think we should do this one thing, but it narrows down the choices from my perspective that I'd like to share, but I'd like to hear the rest of what the public has to say before.
Well, can I just follow up
Yeah.
with the answer, sorry, but I was asking not what number you are guessing would actually show up, but what number would mean to you that if you got rid of RTM, you hadn't made a mistake. That's the number I was curious about. Because if you're asking for input about our current system, it seems to be flawed majorly because it's fueled by people who are unhappy. So if you're going to, I just mean people who want to show up and people who want to do the survey and people who want to come and raise their hand, and they're the people who are unhappy with this, with RTM. That's what the survey shows. It doesn't show that the majority of people in Brattleboro are unhappy with RTM. It shows that the people who wanted to come and tell you their opinions are unhappy with RTM. And I can't help but notice that the people who are unhappy with RTM are the ones whose the votes didn't go the way they wanted them to go.
And that's why I keep stressing, we've been taking public input since February 2024.
Right.
So the survey is only one period of time, and it occurred at a certain period of time.
Yeah, and so it's just to bring that all back, it's if the point of looking at a different model is based on increasing participation and a more democratic system, then if you're expecting either less people to show up or maybe more on a good year, but even less people than already show up at RTM, which I think is a pretty good estimate, then what exactly are you changing the system for? Because that doesn't, to me, seem like we now have a system that encourages more of a democratic process if you're actually thinking less people are going to show up.
This is something that I've been thinking about since we had our forum, and I think that there is a misunderstanding that we are trying to increase participation, we are trying to increase access.
Right.
We can't make people participate in the democracy, but we want to be able to afford anyone access that wants to be able to participate. And I think a lot of the feedback we've been getting is that people feel like there are barriers to entry to participating, but we can't make people more civically engaged, and the charter is not going to accomplish that. We are just looking at ways that we might be able to make it available to more people, but you can't, you can lead the horse to water, you can't make it drink, you can't force people to go vote. We're not looking at increasing the number of people that vote or participate. We're just looking at ways that people are able to access the system.
Yeah, so you could take the word increased democratic engagement and replace it with the word access. And so you could say, if less people have accessed town meeting than they accessed when we had RTM, then is that a success or not a success? Because now less people have access to that. Does that make sense?
I don't see how opening it up to more people being able to participate would mean less people have access. Could you explain that to me?
Well, we're talking in theory, so I'm saying if once it's happened and less people have access to the meeting, which you can tell by a head count of who's in the meeting, then you opening it up has actually not increased access by just, in theory perhaps, but is that?
Are you saying that if we went to open town meetings, say, and consistently, things are pretty stable in town, and consistently fewer people come than would have come if we had 140 people at RTM. Then you're saying that we actually made things less accessible and less democratic. Is that what you're saying?
I would just say that it would be a fact that less people accessed the town meeting.
Got you.
But they have the
That's
opportunity to access it.
They still have the open door.
Right, and so, yeah, so then, so how many years do they get that opportunity before we go back to something else? 15?
Yeah. The next charter.
Charter?
There's another.
Do you want David to go
David.
first, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. David Lovelock, District 9. I'm going to speak up in favor of vitriol. Actually, not in terms of vitriol, but people have said, the discussion gets heated, but these are issues that people care a great deal about. And so having debate is an important part of the process. And of course, I'll mention, because my least favorite option of the three is this Australian ballot. There's no debate, there's no discussion. People do change their mind in the course of RTM. Second thing I'll say is, for all of the complaints about RTM, and I always go home and tell my friends, how many hours I put in at the gym, while they're in comfortable seats, people show up. We generally have 130 or 140 people who show up and who pretty much stay the entire day. Of course, the fact that the budget's at the end is an important piece of that. But so, yeah, it's annoying, and sometimes I want to shoot a couple of the speakers. I'm not, I'm just tired of what they have to say, or, I don't think they're saying it well. But that's the nature of the process, and I think that process is very valuable. The last thing I'll say, at least in this moment, is you talk about information meetings. Bob Osher and I started about 4 years ago having district forums. I'm delighted that they're not going on in District 7 and 8. The turnout has gotten better. This year has been very good with the budget and the question of the community safety ordinance. But it's still about 30 people. In terms of open town meeting, I'm struck by the fact that these are people who choose to come to these forums, so they're interested in something that's going on. And I'm delighted they're there. I'm delighted to answer their questions. I'm not sure they have a whole lot of information. Very often they're asking questions, and they don't really know, the ins and outs of the budget or the conditions of this ordinance. I think I'm not always overwhelmed by the level of knowledge of people who had RTM, but relative to the forum, which I think is more general public, I think they are relatively better informed. And then the last thing I'll say is you've made reference to information meetings. This connects to this question of forum. If you end up going that route of Australian ballot with, quote, information meetings, they can't be information meetings. They have to be discussions, debates, I don't know what you want to call it. But the notion that, as we had yesterday, where people get to ask questions and are not supposed to advocate, we don't need to hear all that much more from the select board anymore. People need to express themselves to the select board. I think RTM does that, by the way. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I think David makes a good point. I do think we need debate. I just don't think we need to have it with a select number of people that then get to vote. So I think, my suggestion was that we have a moderated discussion with whoever wants to show up. And I don't think fewer people would show up if it was not RTM. I think the same people that go to RTM would probably show up plus some more, because they wouldn't have to follow all the protocols and all that kind of stuff. And then people could listen online or whatever, and then the people who wanted to could vote. And we have more voters than we do representative town meeting members. And I think that, you add that up and that's more democratic. Nothing's perfect. And I think you're right. We can't force people to vote. There's a lot of registered voters who don't vote. And I think sometimes it's apathy because they don't see things that they feel like are worth them showing up for. But if a town budget vote or, issues like that, I think they probably would.
He wants to share his words of wisdom.
Yeah, I won't claim words of wisdom. I have a perspective to share. I'll ask everybody here and online to bear with me. I've been thinking about it a lot. I know we've all been thinking about it a lot, but in preparation for tonight, how to try to put it in perspective. It's a very complicated question. I think there are reasonable arguments that can be made for any of the three alternatives, and we've heard so much input that we frankly have in front of us reasonable and unreasonable arguments in favor of all three alternatives. And so I've been trying to think about how, when it comes down for each of us to share a perspective and then work together to get to a place where we together make a recommendation, what would I say about my process? And here's what I would say about it. With due respect to those who favor Australian ballot, and I think it's been interesting how much discussion there's been about how it can be a hybrid. There can be a community dynamic to it. I think that's good and healthy. In my opinion, it's insufficient because we lose one thing that I don't believe can be incorporated into that unless we have a process that goes on for many weeks, is the ability to make amendments. So we can have a dialogue before we go to the ballot box, but we're still at the ballot box, up or down on whatever's been presented to us. To me, that's a fatal flaw to making the leap from a more constrained system of town meeting to everybody gets to vote. is we lose not only, I think inevitably that would lead to the sort of average degree of, it's not a well-phrased sentence, but like the degree to which each one of us is informed when we cast our vote, the average measure of how well-informed a participant is, I believe, would go down inevitably just by having that much larger group. There will be people who haven't listened to the dialogue who will show up to cast their ballot. But I'm not as much concerned about that. I think that's a risk, but I'm not as much concerned about that because there's that counterbalance of, that's how we elect our leaders, and that's what democracy is about, is encouraging people to be a part of the process. I think that the thing that makes it impossible for me to support the Australian ballot piece is that in that community engagement, hopefully without vitriol, sometimes with, but when we're sharing our contrasting views of what would make a better town, sometimes in that there's magic when people who have disagreed, especially like entered the room like firmly disagreeing with one another, land in a place, well, if we did just a little change, or if we did a big change, there's a place that more of us can rally around, and that feels like a better solution. So we accomplish both, hopefully, a better solution, but importantly also arriving at it together. And I don't feel a lot of ownership in this moment. I have a preference, but I don't feel a lot of ownership in whether we stick with RTM or switch to open. But I feel really strongly that we should not switch to Australian ballot. For me personally, I don't feel as strongly, as I just said, about which type of town meeting. I think there's pros and cons to making a change. Most of those have been said, so I won't try to rephrase them all. The one, though, that I find compelling in a way that I didn't expect to, it's not a concern that resonated to me when I was working in town government, and it's not a concern that I entered into this process carrying with me. But in the engagement with each other and with the community over the last year and a half on this topic, I have grown concerned about when we have competitive elections. It's interesting that for so many years the complaint was the elections aren't competitive, and that felt to me like then we're having a debate about which type of town meeting to have, when in fact de facto we were having open town meetings. Everybody who wanted to participate could. There is an argument about whether the barrier to entry was intimidating to some people, but in general everybody who wanted to participate could. This year we didn't have that, and I found compelling in the community dialogue over the last few months the concern that people don't know who's on the ballot. In select board elections and in legislative elections and congressional elections, there are campaigns, and there's a more focused, usually just a few people to choose from. When there's 17 seats available and 26 people running, and there's no campaign, it's at best a popularity contest, and at worst, like, just skip it because I don't know who most of these people are. And then then the election process isn't serving the purpose it's supposed to serve for RTM. So personally, I lean towards switching to open town meeting and giving the thing a shot. And if we work with it for several years and find problems with it, then we may have to make another change. But personally, I'm finding myself leaning towards open town meeting. But if we don't choose that, I hope we do choose to stay with and try to improve representative town meeting.
May I speak to
Oh, yeah.
Cheryl's one? Sorry, David Lovenbach. I think it was Tom Franks who organized the League of Women Voters survey, which I completed.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that I'm not even going to question the format of what it was done. I noticed that some of the people who ran, didn't complete that form, even though they had been invited. I'm sure they got the emails. I found that survey really useful because I could, there are people I said, nah, I don't want those people. And yet I do want these people. And then I had to fill in some people I didn't know because I wanted to keep somebody off. But I mean, not going to say who, but in fact, and the town could do that as well. The town clerk could, under some sort of committee, God, not the finance committee, please, but could formulate a survey question, invite RTM members and post it on the web. And that would give people an opportunity to know who the candidates are. And the other thing I'll say, and Hillary will kill me, if you do go representative town meeting, I would like to see if you could take, say, the 3 districts and divide each of them into 3 wards so that it's more representative of the various neighborhoods. Thank you.
Yeah, Peter, I appreciate your point about being able to make amendments to the process, and I think the number of meetings that the select board has had over the last year about the budget, I think is a good example of how they've tried to take input from people and change the budget. So I do think we have a town-wide amendment process already in place, and I think we need to emphasize that more. I don't think it really helps to have it. I think my neighbor Andy said, the RTM is not supposed to be a legislative body offering amendments. I don't think that's what it's supposed to be. I do think that we can have amendments, and we've had some on the ballot this past year that have given very specific questions to the electorate to say, do you want this or that? So I think we can have that sort of process through a ballot with the sort of debate and discussion forum as well. I don't think an Australian ballot limits the ability to amend things. I think you just have to design the ballot questions so that they're available to people, for people to decide.
I know in these meetings we're not supposed to have a direct dialogue. I want to ask a question, because I don't fully understand what you said. So I want to make sure that we're talking about the same kind of amendment. The point I was trying to make was when there's a proposal in front of whomever, right? It's on the ballot or it's on a warning, but the proposal is to do X. And some people enter the room thinking we should do X, and some people enter the room wanting to vote no on that. There's a discussion around it, and we decide instead that we should do Y. We're going to vote yes on Y, because in the course of the discussion, somebody moved that it'd be different. And so the thing we actually ended up voting on and approving is different. That's what I think would be a material loss if we go to Australian ballot. I'm not sure, are you describing?
That's the select board's responsibility. They have, one select board member has one idea, another select board has another idea. Yeah. Somebody else comes in and says, hey, Peter, Kate, I have a better idea to combine your 2 things. That's what I think you should do. And then you guys go, oh yeah, we're gonna do Tom's idea. But that's the select board process, and it's a town-wide, the people on the select board are representing the entire town, right? They're obligated to represent everybody in the town. An RTM member is not.
Sure.
So that's the issue I have, yeah.
Except in support of what Peter was saying, is I've been on RTM for a number of years now, and I have seen the whole amendment process. And amendments, somebody will propose an amendment, there'll be an amendment to the amendment, and maybe an amendment to that amendment. And there's a lot of discussion about it, and I think that's really healthy. And I think, I've talked to people in Marlboro. My brother-in-law used to be the moderator there. And they've gone to all Australian ballot. And people miss that dialogue. They have an informational meeting, but nobody comes. So that whole community discussion about issues is missing. And I think that's one of the pitfalls of Australian ballot, or going to only Australian ballot.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, I think you're right.
I think if we look at the responsibilities of what RTM does currently, it can be split so that either open town meeting or a modified RTM does some of them, and some of them are done by Australian ballot. And I don't see, but going to only Australian ballot is something that I would
Quick
not
pause. Are we still like
Yeah.
on it for minutes, on it for recording? Are we still?
It looks like we're muted.
Yeah, the camera's still recording.
Okay, just wanna make sure.
I'm in a Zoom meeting right now. I'm surprised I can't see us up there.
Yeah, you're the co-host, so you should be able to.
Okay, sorry.
I just want to build off of what Maya's saying. I think that a lot of the feedback we've been getting over the, very long period of time that we've been working on this and looking at the history of RTM and everything else. And as someone who is a born and raised Vermonter but is not from Brattleboro and has lived in everywhere from Burlington to a town of 900 people, I've seen a lot of different models, and the one thing that I think makes Vermont really unique is the open town meeting and the ability to have this community discussion, and Brattleboro especially seems to really want and
Recording in progress.
Like, it seems to be a very popular thing that people like to come in and they like to talk and they like to discuss it, and I think that going to all Australian ballot, you do lose that, and I don't think that is direction we necessarily need to go, but the feedback that we got on RTM and some of the fears about an open town meeting are about making it more streamlined. And I think that there are some things where there is no need for an amendment. There's sort of pro forma or simple up-down votes that you could consolidate some of that into an Australian ballot to narrow the scope of the open town meeting and to make it less, to shorten the day and to make it so that more people can be heard on more issues through an Australian ballot on things that don't require an amendment. And maybe something like we had on this last ballot where there's sort of a question of like how much, sort of some advisory questions to guide the open town meeting for people that don't come and participate in that as well. And I think that that's maybe, for me personally, I think something we should look at is, because that was a lot of the feedback we got at RTM was the sort of the procedure of it. And again, I don't know how much of that is what we address here as part of the charter, but I think that there are some things that we can sort of create a structure that will make it a more streamlined process, but open up access to more people.
Joy.
A question to former select board members and folks who might know that meeting style. Something in my mind based on some comments. I recall being on watching a recent select board meeting, and I heard a comment be said that while it is a meeting in the public, it is not of the public.
Yes.
And so the select board doesn't have to listen to anyone. Putting an amendment asking for something different doesn't have to happen. And what the select board puts forth, both on the Australian ballot or the warning for open town meeting or RTM, is what the select board puts on, and it's not of the people, and it's of the board, and there is or is not a process to have accountability for that.
And the select board makes it very clear that town meeting will have its say when this gets to town meeting. Tom?
Well, it is a public process because the people sitting there are elected by the town. So if they don't do what the town wants to do, then they get unelected. That's the democratic process that we have in place. I will offer a friendly amendment to Peter's suggestion, which is if we could have a discussion where people are offering suggestions to make changes, and then they get put on a ballot as a ballot advisory question, so that everybody gets to vote on the suggestion that came up out of a discussion, rather than just a select number of people. Right, so that would be my amendment to your suggestion.
And the one thing that we've heard consistently with everybody, it doesn't matter if you're for Australian ballot, open or RTM, is people want to offer an opinion. You know what I mean? It's like, no, so there's a universal thing in our town that we want to be able to actually talk and actually make an impact on something. And to Hannah, what you were talking about too, we learned through our process, there are some things that are on that town meeting warning the town meeting doesn't have to do.
Right.
So
Quite a
just,
few, actually.
right, quite a few that we don't have to do. So if we do stay with some kind of actual sitting in a room together meeting, there are things that it can automatically be shortened by some of these things that we do not have to do. So, but I feel.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I'm totally not.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I feel that whatever we do, it has to involve engagement and a level. And I, it's funny, and I realize through this whole process, the discussions we had prior to the March town meeting, you know, we're hearing from different people. My experience at town meeting was sometimes when people were talking, I'm talking with people, and I'm like, I must have been at a different town meeting because I had a completely different experience. It's really weird, you know, because I think everybody, the 140 people sitting there, you talked to each of us and we had a completely different experience, which I think is really fascinating. You know, I left going, that was the best town meeting I've been to, and like, really, I was like all excited. I went home, I'm like, that was so exciting. And then I talked to people who were like so upset, and I thought, gosh, you know, we were all sitting at the same space in the same really uncomfortable metal folding chairs, and you know, we each had a different experience. So that's sort of what I'm struggling with, saying, you know, my experience was this, and I'm talking to somebody who's had a totally different experience. And what's fascinating, being a student of town meeting, my father was town moderator for 22 years, so I've watched, you know, 22 plus years of town meetings. And what the reason I was happy, or that I saw in this town meeting, was really going back to everybody showed up. You know, and there was competitive elections like it used to be, and there was dialogue, you know, so, but I still think no matter where we go, even the people who want Australian ballot, even Tom, when you're saying this, is we need to discuss it with each other. Mm-hmm. And I worry that for the moment, that Australian ballot might sound good because of the experience, whether we liked town meeting or didn't, that we're gonna regret if we go that way. I mean, that's sort of what and I'm saying that not because of my experience at town meeting, but because of what we've been hearing from February 2024, when we started hearing it, and what we've heard it literally like every month since we've been meeting till now. The constant theme is we want to be able to offer our opinion. And will we be satisfied as a community by sitting in a room deliberating something, but not being there for the solution? You know what I mean? We're gonna sit in a room and deliberate something, then it's gonna go on an Australian ballot, and then all of us that sat in the room wanted A, but then it's B, and then we just all waste our time sitting in that room. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm struggling with that. It's kind of like, at least when we're at the high school gym in the really uncomfortable metal folding chairs, whether we like the outcome or not, we've at least all been there participating, and we're there for the outcome. That's sort of where I'm, like, I struggle with the whole idea of hybrid Australian ballot. Then we'll go to the public.
Yeah, and on this topic of streamlining, you're right. We've heard that, you know, the length of the meetings is a concern. There are certain other aspects of just like, you know, some of it feels very arcane. Some of it is very arcane. There's items that were on every single year that just don't need to be on. And so part of the streamlining can be actually how we address in the charter making standard certain things that right now aren't standard and so therefore have to be addressed every year at town meeting. Like, for instance, there are many places where the town clerk is elected. In Brattleboro, many years ago, we switched, as we are allowed to under state law, to have that be an appointed position. But we have this sort of carrying on sort of, what's the word when it's a thing that you don't use anymore? There's a biological term.
Vestigial.
Yeah, a vestige. So anyway, so yeah, this vestigial aspect of like, the select board has to appoint Hillary every year.
Yeah.
And then representative town meeting has to spend 5 minutes going through a process of ratifying Hillary every year. It's silly. You hire a qualified person to be the town clerk and they either do the job well or they don't. They're accountable to the town manager. We should make that clear in the charter, and then it's not a thing that takes up time at town meeting. There's 3 or 4 other things like that. And then there's some ones that are a little more nuanced, but only a little more nuanced, like the ability to borrow money in anticipation of taxes. Put it in the charter that the select board can borrow money in anticipation of taxes, because if we were in a year like this year and something went sideways, and we don't know yet for sure that there's going to be an approved budget next week, they've got to be able to run the government. And so they might have to borrow money to keep us going during July and August. That should just be part of how we do business rather than something that has to be approved at town meeting.
I think Tom and then, Anthony.
There was a suggestion, Andy Davis, by the way, there was a suggestion in the steering committee to have the ability to propose a consensus agenda, and any item could be taken out of that with a single objection. So if somebody really did want to discuss why X is serving in X position, and they felt there was a reason to have a conversation about that, that could be with a single person removed from the consensus agenda, but a proposal could be made. Articles 1 through 6, can we vote on them as one item? Are there any objections? And someone could say, I would like to remove Article 3 from the consensus. And that was one thing that was proposed. And there was a whole bunch of other good things like that in that steering committee. But I wanted to say this, is that I often tell people when they say, why do you run for RTM? And I would say, well, I have learned so much about the town of Brattleboro, the people that live here, and I'm really glad that this conversation has moved toward qualitative issues, a little bit away from quantitative, because I really do think that we could talk about expanding the number of representatives at RTM if we decide to stick with that, and that RTM could be as many as 180, or a number easily divisible by roughly 3. But 180 people would add more. And so the issue of competition, I will say that even in the years when vote for 14 of the above and there's only 12 names there, if I hadn't seen their picture at the post office or been at a meeting with them when I thought they really didn't get civil discourse, but I didn't know who they were, I said, they've put their hat in the ring. I'm voting for them with enthusiasm. I'll meet them at RTM. I'll learn something more about them. It's not about they've taken a step toward public service by saying, I want to run for RTM. So I don't actually have a problem with voting for people with less information. I do it at the state level sometimes. I don't really know who this person is running for the auditor of accounts in Montpelier. But we have the party thing, you see, but let's not get into that. The other thing I did want to say is that I find myself running into people during the rest of the year who maybe I completely disagreed with on the budget or on human services or something, but we're down there on the sidewalk having a 30-minute conversation. We started off waiting to cross the street. And I really like that point that you brought up at town meeting. And I really think it's important to stick with the qualitative elements of this and not just the numbers of people that participate. I know that sounds like, it's hard to argue against Australian ballot as the most level playing field. Every single person in town can crawl, walk, hop, jump, or into the voting booth and have their opinion made. It's hard to argue against that if you just want. But why do we have this notion in New England that open town meeting is the purest form of democracy in America? But it isn't really, because not everybody can go to town meeting, even if it's an open town meeting, because of their work, their family, and relative that needs care 24/7. So it's never going to be completely pure, but I really do think it's good that we stick with some of the qualitative aspects that town government should not just be making decisions, but building community and civil discourse. No one's used that term. I think one thing we learned at RTM is how to have civil discourse. I have not actually experienced vitriol at any level that's disturbed me ever. And I think that our moderator, David Gartenstein, if somebody does turn and say, "But Bill," no, all comments are directed through the moderator. It's Robert's Rules of Order. And we learn a lot about process and how you run a democracy. And having a voting booth, you don't learn very much about process. You just learn, too much money, no. Or, you can't simplify it in the ballot box. And although it's completely even playing field, and no one can argue that one person has more access than another, I don't think we get that learning curve that you can get at a public meeting. So I would go, if we don't have RTM, I would much prefer to go to an open meeting and see how that works, because then everybody in town who goes does learn about civil discourse and Robert's Rules of Order and how to make an amendment to an article. And I think that's really important, those qualitative aspects of learning and relating to one another. That's it.
Andy,
Yeah.
that steering committee,
I was on it too.
yeah.
We could write a book.
Andy and I know.
Does anybody have, there was a survey that was done.
I might have that.
I just have a lot of it.
Do you have a copy?
I think we could find, I think a lot of it might be still on the town website.
The survey was done through the town on SurveyMonkey. I'll go see if I have it too. I'll go look for my stuff.
There were some other good suggestions. There were quite a few.
Yeah, because last July, when we had been talking about RTM, I made almost a page and a half and it's double spaced,
If we decide to go RTM, I'll go through my boxes.
of
I'll see what I can find.
Yeah. If we go,
I think
I'll let you know.
Millicent Cooley said she had a copy,
does.
but
if we go to RTM, we will
we
reconstruct.
will want that,
And
yeah.
we'll reconstruct the steering committee.
There were some
Good
good
ideas.
Yeah.
We'll go Tom and then Gary and then David.
On the question of opinions and being able to express your opinion, and I think all of us in the room, perhaps for maybe the BCTV guys, are here because this is the way we like to express our opinions, and we have the time to do it and the luxury to be here on a, Thursday evening. A lot of people don't, but they're still entitled to their opinion. And the diversity of opinions you get in a vote that is town-wide is much greater than the diversity of votes sitting in this room. And so that's my point in saying we should have an opportunity for everybody to express their opinion in the ways that they want to express their opinion. They should have the option of coming to a meeting and expressing their opinion, but they should also say, I'm just going to vote. So we have to give that kind of access and diversity of opinion a chance here, and I just don't think RTM does that.
I'm going to Gary first.
Yeah, hi, Gary Shaw, District 8. I'm still straddling the fence on that, but I have to agree with Peter's. I'm thinking too, some of the articles that are on it, like Tripart, by the time we get to that, half the people probably already left. And there's a lot of stuff, I'm wondering if articles can be shifted and, some of the things that we sit through, by the time we get to the human service, which is usually the biggest one, besides committee appointments and all that and everything, I think that's the one that takes up the bulk of your time. So with that being said, if that comes up to a town-wide vote, do we need to have something like that? as an article, because I mean, the last meeting over, was it 11 hours, our last RTM? That's probably the longest one I've ever been on. So that's another thing. I think when we had the steering committee, we were talking about what things can we eliminate, remember, Andy? I mean, what was the most important things? And besides lunch, the issue, my thought was that in certain articles and certain things can be shifted, you know, so that way these things are done. And like you said, I agree with appointing, you know, town staff and everything, that can be done or put on the ballot, you know, during regular election. That's why I guess my thoughts, I guess another one was thinking too, I said, what if we appointed from each district, the town chairs, when it comes to, well, they could be representing each district in a type of RTM manner. I mean, I was looking at different options and stuff, sort of like the Hunger Games, you represent somebody from each district or something, but, you know, my thought is like, we have, and Andy, you were mentioning having more people, we're already at packed to capacity. In some places, I believe, no?
You can fit 1,000 people in a high school gym,
You can.
yes.
Yeah.
They
So
do-
now-
They do graduation there if it's raining.
I asked at your last meeting, how many registered voters were there? Somebody said 9,000.
If we had 9,000 people want to show up to a meeting, then we could all celebrate as a town. You know? Yeah, we'll do it out, I think we could do it outside in the winter because it'll be so pretty.
But my question is, that you would have to have more staff, correct, for those many voters, if those many voters come out to vote on.
If, I would be, I mean, who knows? But I
Yeah.
don't know what issue in our town would bring out enough people to fill the high
Right.
school gym. You know what I mean? That would be 1,000 people.
Yes.
And we've had, if you think about the issues we've had in our town, if they can't bring out 1,000 people, I just can't imagine, unless we're gonna, you know, go and attack Hinsdale and we all, you know what I mean? It's like, what would it be? You
So
know?
we're gonna shut
Yeah.
down 91 so
Yeah.
that the ICE people can't come
Yeah.
into,
And you have a
into
lot of people
Vermont.
this year alone, we voted one. So I think more and more people now are coming out and they're getting more involved, which is great. So just a thought.
David, do you mind if I just drop a fact into the room?
Absolutely.
Just on this question of like, we can't go to open because we don't have enough space to accommodate everybody.
That's not true.
Of course, there could be some circumstance that would push that limit, and we'd have to figure out what to do about that year. But there actually is an example in Vermont of a community almost our size, the largest place in Vermont that has at least some of their business, and I will say they do it hybrid in the manner that some others have talked about tonight. There are some relatively more simple matters that are on an Australian ballot, but the budget and other things that might require more debate and the potential that they might be amended are done in open town meeting is Middlebury. And Middlebury has in excess of 9,000, I don't know exactly what their population is, but a little over 9,000 people. Not our 12,000, but they hold, you know, they do their budget in an open town meeting, and they don't get, you know, they find space for it. You know, they don't get overwhelmed. They don't have insufficient room.
And if worse comes to worse, we set up a system where people can be in the high school gym and in the multi-purpose room and in the auditorium, and you link it all. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, worse comes to worse, if we had that many people.
That's a
But, right, I don't necessarily worry about finding the space for it. Maybe I'm just,
That was my thing, you have to get a lot more people.
I haven't looked this up, but I can say with confidence, I don't think there is a single election with 100% turnout
No.
of registered voters.
No.
So
No.
thinking that you're gonna have that problem is pretty.
it would be,
And I grew up right outside of Middlebury. I can tell you that it was never even a thought that they wouldn't be able to fit everyone for town meeting. It wasn't even and I went to the high school, so it's not a thing.
yeah, you don't have to worry about that.
Sorry, we should go to David because I butted in.
Okay, no, that's fine. David Lovemark, I'm still District 9. There's a feature of RTM and would also be an available feature in open meeting, which is a thing that we don't talk about much, and that is the other matters section. And I think it is useful for us to have a piece of open other matters discussion. I think you could time limit it in such a way that unless the body as a whole wanted to extend that, because we've had cases of people who go on and on and on, but you could have time limited, and you might find a way to have those set up where people announce they want to do those in advance, and they're strewn throughout the meeting. But this gives an opportunity for a much wider range of people to get issues on the agenda politically, if not officially. And so I think that's useful, and that obviously is not possible with Australian Ballot. Thanks.
So, we know where Peter is. I get the sense I know where other people are. Some people I don't know. I know where I am and I am not. And I'm happy to say if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it's time.
Yeah,
I think we
yeah.
need to say where we feel like we're at.
Yeah, and again, I'm looking at this, remembering we started this in February of 2024. I'm trying to pull away from reacting to a specific time. And I tried not to do that when people were coming to us in February and whatever, through all 2024, not reacting. Because at that point, we were having people come in here telling us, we like representative town meeting, there's some things we don't like about it, but you need to keep it, but because we don't get enough people, we need to lower the number. You know what I mean? And that was a reaction back in February 2024, that nobody was running for RTM. So at that point, the urgency was lower the number, you know? So, because when I went through and I reviewed all the previous meetings, I reviewed them, I reviewed all my notes, and it was kind of actually really interesting, because we were hearing from people at certain points of time where something was happening that we had to react a certain way, lower the number of people, blah, 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 So I looked at all the meetings, obviously looked at the survey, looked at the comments. And again, I just said this, the common thread through everything is that people want to be able to offer their opinion. So we have to do something, in my mind, that people get to offer their opinion. And again, I was the first person in December to say, we really need to talk about Australian Ballot. And at the time, there was really no one in the audience or anywhere that even wanted to hear it, I was like, So Australian Ballot didn't come up in any serious way until after representative town meeting. So, I just don't, and it's really funny because I've kind of switched my way of thinking based on just looking at everything and remembering there's certain periods of time. And we have to look at it in the long term, what is it that we want? And I am at a place where I think it should be open town meeting. I feel that more people, I think I might have said this when I was sort of arguing for Australian Ballot, I really want more people to be able to take part in our town government. And I feel really, really strongly for that. And that's why I think it's time to go to open town meeting. And I think it addresses two things. It addresses the need for everybody to have access, as the word Hannah used, and the ability to participate, which I don't think RTM gives, because it just gives 140 people the chance to participate, as opposed to everybody. And open town meeting gives the opportunity for people to offer their opinion and talk about it with each other, which Australian Ballot doesn't. So I kind of see open town meeting, it's not, is it perfect? Or if you're Australian Ballot, do you really like open town meeting? Probably not. If you're open town meeting, you know, do you think this, or do you want representative town meeting? You might not like open town meeting, but I think it's out of the three options that we have, open town meeting is the one that I think addresses the concerns of every single person who has offered an opinion to us, you know, based on the things that I have heard. So that's where right now I am leaning towards, and I try not to, you know, there's logistics involved in all of this. Whatever we do, there's logistics. And I don't want to get beaten down by the logistics right now, because we may have conversations about the logistics and go, what do we do about this and that? But just literally based on over a year's worth of hearing from people and, you know, experience in things, that's where I feel like I am right now.
Me too.
Yeah.
Same, yeah.
Yeah.
I think giving the most people the chance to come in and express their opinion. I mean, if we could just streamline some of it by putting some of the, you know, the quickie stuff, you know, check it off and basically what you said.
Joy.
I am grateful to remind folks that we have been talking about the forum for a while. And I am still having a tension moment with all of the information and then all of the emotion that comes with it. And I agree that it is about participation and access, and the hope that better access gets better participation. I still had grand plans of like a year ago, how we could fix RTM. We could take all of the feedback and we could make it so good. And I'm not gonna lie, even after the December special, RTM was like, this is a resource, this is an opportunity that the town has at access all the time. We could say that folks show up to select board meetings and this is the amount that can participate or the amount that are allowed to speak to a thing, to a topic. But RTM is 140 people who have the aspirational words of have agreed to pay attention and show up. That is so compelling still inside me but it is still about access and participation of the town. So I am still wrestling with what that means, what that looks like. I will continue to do my best with all of the information. So it is between open town meeting and RTM.
I'm not gonna force anybody to.
I mean, I think I've sort of expressed my view on this a little bit already, but I think that RTM is disenfranchising a lot of people. I think that there are people that think that somehow just by being on RTM, those people are somehow better educated on the issues or better informed or are taking it more seriously, and that is not a requirement to be an RTM member. The only requirement is that you get 10 signatures and you get your name on the ballot, or you get, caucused in. You might not even need that. There is no requirement that they be more educated, and there's no requirement for any voter to be educated on the issues. It's really, we should just be letting as many people participate as possible. And I do think that that the open debate is really important, but I think it's also really important to get as many people participating as possible. And I think that we should look at an open town meeting that is more streamlined, and I think we should consider if there is some way to put some sort of advisory votes on a townwide ballot and do the open town meeting. After that, so that there is sort of this baseline, broader feedback from the voters who choose to participate, not from the whole town, because that's not what it is. But that, that you're coming in with this guidance from the electorate. And maybe, again, maybe we'll get bogged down in the logistics and that won't actually work or make sense. I don't think that going to a full Australian ballot is good. I think that there's a lot to be said by looking your neighbors in the face and telling them your opinion, but I also don't want people to be so intimidated by that they can't express that their voices aren't being heard either. So I think that we should look at an open town meeting with some with some, like we discussed, narrowing it down and seeing if there's some way to also get some sort of advisory information from the town prior to that meeting.
And that's what they did with those things that were on the March ballot.
Right, but like 1%,
Yeah.
1 to 2, like,
Yeah.
and I don't know how helpful that was. I don't know if that swayed anyone's opinion who was actually at RTM, but I think that would be useful.
Could have been worded better.
Yeah.
I think I'm still torn between open town meeting and trying to do something about RTM. But I'd like to see some kind of hybrid where some things are voted on, at least in an advisory way, by Australian ballot.
Kind of like what Hannah just described.
Yeah. But I think I could deal with either an RTM or an open town meeting. We got a lot of suggestions about what to do about RTM. And I was thinking about that this afternoon, and I was thinking, somebody mentioned the survey that Tom Franks and the League of Women Voters did, and I was really disappointed because so many people that were running did not fill out the survey. And then we got all these complaints that I didn't know anybody who was on the ballot, I didn't know what they thought, I didn't know. And if we made that a requirement of being on the ballot some way, that you had to fill out the survey, that's one thing that I was thinking of. But I haven't decided about open town meeting or RTM.
Now, not to put the people on the spot that are, I think, maybe, I don't know, Peter's, most of us here, or most of you, are still sort of, we know, I think, Australian ballot, we're not gonna recommend that. I mean, unless we all change our minds.
Not totally Australian
not about here.
ballot.
Yeah.
Before you summarize that, I want to be careful about us saying we're not going to do Australian ballot because we already do Australian ballot, actually.
That's right.
We already,
That's right.
that's how we vote for the officials, and there's always a question or two, almost always a question or two there too. So we've heard some discussion and from the community as well about expanding that maybe.
Yes,
Alongside, I think the commitment we're making is to still hold a meeting.
yes, no, that's fair. I didn't mean to say we're not doing Australian ballot. I meant
Not
we're not.
100%.
Right.
Not 100%
We're-
Australian
Right, we're
ballot.
not shifting our annual town meeting form to Australian ballot. I guess the question now is, what information, is it just having time to think about it, or is there information that we could put together or look for or whatever that can help us move towards deciding, are we saying our annual form of town meeting, the majority, I don't know, I don't wanna say, because I'm being respectful of some things will be Australian ballot, it may be. But will our primary form of annual town meeting be open town meeting or representative town meeting? what do we need to make that decision? Like, is there something that we need to make that decision, or is it just taking the time to talk about it amongst us? You know what I mean? Like, what is it that we can do?
So I think that, like I said at the beginning, I don't think we need to come into this with like fully fledged.
Oh, no.
But I think that we just need to rip off the Band-Aid and decide, is this open town meeting going to be a representative or an open, and then we can, from there, pull out all the, but I think, and I don't know that I necessarily need any more information to make that decision if other people feel that they do, but I we need to start drafting stuff, and I think in that process of drafting, we will be able to identify some of these other issues that we need to address,
But how do we get to, because I know where I am right now, unless somebody can, I mean, we may have a discussion and more people are saying like they think representative town meeting is better, and you might convince me. But like right now, I feel like I don't need convincing, but I'm trying to help help some people who are, we're still on the how do we get there, right?
I don't need any more information, I just need to think about it.
Yeah, that's what that's what I'm asking. Is it, do we wait till the next meeting and then decide, okay, we've thought about it? And again, I could just change my mind between the next meeting, I don't know, but like right now I know where I am, but I don't want everyone else to feel like they'd have to know where they are.
Yeah, so as somebody who is wrestling with this, and I can be an outward processor if it's not in such an intense situation. So I think if you would indulge me in maybe a minute or two of like what examples would be, like staffing of this. Do I need to hear from staff?
Hillary.
I don't think so. I don't think that's going to change my opinion on how to help vote and move this forward. So like, if we were just like throwing out ideas of like, what's the thing? We can't do another survey, off the table. We can't like ask more people to show up. Like, okay, so that's not gonna be the deciding factor, like push me over the fence on some side. Like, yeah, so I still like outward processing, but like I can't find the thing that would be it. So I think it would just, is the request that the vote is tonight?
Oh, no.
Okay, so the request is that the vote is on the next meeting.
It would be great if we could move ourselves forward.
Totally, no, I just wanna make sure if it's tonight or next meeting, and if it's next meeting, then I can come back with a confident vote.
I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, we can't leave this room tonight till we figure it out. Because
how late are we gonna be here?
I would just like to know we were supposed to make this decision last week.
Correct.
Due to factors beyond control.
It'll still be May.
It'll still be May.
Just a quick question. Are there other topics this significant that the Charter Review Commission is looking at? I mean, I consider this a pretty big change for the town of Brattleboro. Are there anything else that's up in this league?
No, I mean, we've again been doing this
Select board.
2 years now. We've been doing this for 2 years. We've added, this is the like, I think the final big thing. We made some decisions about putting non-citizen voting in, which is it's a change for our town, that something's changed. There are other things, but this one, because right now representative town meeting is literally like there's pieces of it referenced in almost every section of the charter, that making this decision is going to help us go back and start.
This is the big.
Because we've pretty much, really is the biggest thing left. We still have things left. We have to look at the select board section and the town manager section. But this one, this is something that it threads throughout the entire charter.
So do you have a deadline, you're saying, basically, you want this, how much time do you have left with the charter? Do you have another year or two?
We can go on as long as
I
we
mean,
want to.
Is it
But we
urgency or
don't
something
want
like that
to.
right away
There is
before the budget?
what we want to do is get this done right away.
Okay.
Because this process that we have to go through is, we want the legislature to look at this in January 2026, or the legislative session of 2026. But we also want the town to vote on our recommendations, because we don't get the final say. If we had the final say, it would be great, but we don't. So what's gonna happen is, we get this done, it has to go to a townwide vote, that's what we want it to go to a townwide vote. Then it has to go to the legislature, then it has to hopefully get through the legislature, and then the governor has to sign it. Our goal is to get this done so the legislature can take it up in 2026. So we need to get it done, because when we have to warn it, we have to do, there's certain things that, we obviously want to have informational meetings to tell the public, here's what our recommendations are. And again, we're not just recommending a change in the annual form of town meeting. We are recommending changes throughout the entire charter, from front to back, which is really going to be exciting, I think, when people see it.
And reaffirming other sections.
Yes.
So it'll be a whole charter that'll be in front of the community.
Yeah, and we're gonna want enough, we won't just do one meeting and hope that people show up. We want people to
Engage.
really fundamentally understand what we've done. And so we have a time limit on ourselves, because we have to do it.
We
Gotcha.
can't finish drafting it until we make this decision.
Unrelated to the RTM, but just on the overall, are you guys, is there something in the charter now, I don't think there is, that limits the amount of money that people can spend on townwide office elections?
There is not.
But you know what, there's nothing in the charter, but there are state campaign finance laws.
But that would limit the amount of money that can be spent?
Yeah, I don't think, no, they don't cap it, you just have to,
There's a threshold where you have to report.
Yes.
or
That's-
there's a reporting,
State, right.
there's a reporting threshold, but there's nothing that
Like
caps.
Elon Musk could come in and elect a whole select
He
board if
could.
he wanted to, okay.
He'd have to,
Tesla's for everyone.
yeah,
Yeah.
he'd have to report it though.
He could fund a slate.
He
Yeah.
could.
He might not get him elected.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Isn't all that good?
David,
Pardon?
His record isn't all that great.
yeah.
Oh, he could get a president.
David Littlemore, District 9. I have a sort of sentimental feeling toward representative town meeting, but just an observation. One of my initial concerns was open town meeting, but I'm getting over that, is the possibility, or this potential for people to pack the meeting under a particular circumstance. And I think actually we saw some of that in December.
Yeah.
I think there was some packing on both sides, so it may have been more intense on one side than the other. And in a given meeting, that may not be desirable, but one of the things you can anticipate is if it gets packed and the vote goes one way, next year, you're gonna get a reaction. And so I'm warming up to open time meeting. A lot.
And you can't stop that in any kind of Australian ballot election, even for candidates. You know, they spend all their time getting people to vote their way. So I don't, you know, Christina.
Christina Sheanya, District 8. I don't love RTM. I'm not passionate about RTM, but I am really passionate about this experiment called democracy and civic engagement and just actually being involved in choices that affect your life. I do it as a hobby. I do it for a living. I am a shower-upper. I go to all the things, so I know who goes to things and who doesn't go to things. And I try, like I said, as on my free time and as a paid job, to get people to participate in decisions that affect their lives. That's what I'm passionate about. And it's upsetting to me that you're really probably going to jump ship from RTM instead of improve RTM, because every process that will have problems. And we just got so much more engagement and participation in RTM and like just the work that this one resident has been doing alone, just me going and trying to get like RTM reps, pictures on the wall at the library, ways to engage with your representatives, holding forums, and so it's like, can't you just give RTM a good scare and like give us another 15 years and see what we can do with democracy? 12,000 people is too much, and what really bothers me about the open town meeting is that it's relying on a lack of participation and engagement and access to work. In terms of size, in terms of people showing up, it's like everybody can come, everybody has a chance to share their opinion, but you're relying on the fact that only a sliver will. So that, to me, logically, it just doesn't, like I said, I'm not passionate about RTM. I'm just passionate about really like what works, So relying on a sliver of people, like you said, Hannah, in your town, that it was just like, you never even considered that too many people would show up. It was just not an issue. And that, coming from a place with a city of 3 million people, like that doesn't fly with 3 million people, so how does that fly with 12,000? It's just a really flawed piece of logic. And there's one more thing about RTM that I'm trying to like warm up to this open town meeting idea. Honestly, like if we go to open town meeting, I kind of just want it to happen because I'm so curious like what this Vermont experience is like. But RTM is a checks and balances for the select board. So I'm trying to imagine what without that, where it's just a Brattleboro resident is part of the checks and balances for the select board. Like it's really just the residents rely on that. But then, that doesn't feel like I had a better thing to end with.
Can I just say the couple things for me, and again, I'm a student of representative town meeting because I had to watch my father for 22 years, like be the moderator. So I love representative town meeting. I mean, it's like a holiday for me. And it's really kind of sad. It's really like, I used to come home from where I lived somewhere else to come to watch representative town meeting in Brattleboro. And what really through this whole thing, I never really thought about it so much until now. But what really sort of, the fact that twice as many people put their names forward to be a representative town meeting member this year, I thought, why should half of them not get to participate? Do you know what I mean? It's like everybody who wanted to be a representative town meeting should have been able to participate. So that's sort of where I'm like, that's why I think open is important, because there were so many people who actually wanted to participate. And also sitting through every single select board meeting for the last 3 years, there were so many people that came to the select board meetings that wanted to participate. And some of them wanted to be RTM members, and some of them were like, I don't like to run for stuff, but they wanted to participate. So I sort of took this, what people have been saying to us, and then realizing that's why at the end of last year, I'm like, we need Australian ballot because everyone should be able to participate, blah, blah, blah. But then of course I realized through this whole thing, even the Australian ballot people want people to be able to talk. So that's sort of why I have come from, like I've been everywhere, I'm like the cheerleader for RTM, I love it, it's a holiday in my family, to wow, everyone should be able to participate, we need Australian ballot, to well wait a second, people want to speak. So that's why I've come to being in this open town meeting thing, because I really believe that everybody in this town should be able to speak and say what they think. So that's kind of where I am.
I was going to say, I remember what I was going to say at the end, is that must be getting late because then it just went right out of the brain.
Yeah.
But that the, sorry, it's gone. What are you saying?
I'm struggling with the fact that you keep suggesting that there might somehow be less participation in an open meeting. Because everything that I have heard is that people want to participate, and like Kate said, I don't see why they shouldn't. This concern about packing the room or about a lot of people showing up when there's an important issue, like that's how it should work, quite frankly. And I don't really know I don't see how having an open town, like, I think at the end of the day, the same people that go to RTM are gonna show up to open town meeting, and then maybe you get a couple new voices in the room.
I think it will be much harder for me to access an open town meeting than it is for me to access RTM.
How so?
Childcare stipend is the number one thing. The number two thing is that I've made a commitment, and I said I was gonna show up, and my district is counting on me. Otherwise, there would definitely be like, no, it's okay, I won't go. It's, just things come up, and it's, if you're not, like, if I didn't have to be there, my family would not let me go.
I don't think there's anything that we have to get rid of the childcare stipend.
Right.
And I think that I forget who told us this, but there are a lot of people that get elected that don't show up.
Right.
No, there's a handful.
It didn't happen this year, it has happened.
It has happened
yeah.
in the past, but there's a hand. People are sick. There's a family issue.
Yeah.
But again, we'll know what the day is too. It's not like it's gonna be a floating day and you don't know. It'll be a set day in March or whatever.
Yeah.
So the only difference is you're not elected. You still know this is the day,
Right.
you know? I think Gary was first, and then we'll go this way.
Well, from my experience as being a town representative and chair, I speak not just for the elected, but the people who can't come out, or people who have that inability not to know or who's represented. I go to every walk of life, people, whatever, homeless. So you're speaking for everyone in your community. So when people say just you're elected or whatever, or you're registered, it's not just your registered voters you're representing. You're representing a whole facet of people of different backgrounds, nationalities, incomes in your area that aren't registered voters. So people that say, oh, there's registered voter, or there's people, there are people who don't have access or can't come out. So I'm basically, my servitude is for those who are in the many spectrum, be they disabled, whatever. So I look at it in that area, and not just for certain people who say, I ask a lot of people, hey, you want to be a rep? There were times, no, I don't want to be a rep. I'm talking to many people about many different reasons why they don't want to be a rep, or they do want to be a rep, or they can't even come out this late because for whatever reason in the stores, I go shop and I see people, why they can't even come. Versus when they sell either or, there are so many different reasons why people want to be on or not be on. You may have a huge crowd, you may not. It depends on the issue for that town in a lot of cases that they come out, or who's running. So if you have something, well, we want some parking funds, I'm not going to that meeting for select board. Or if it has to do with, I'm there. So that's what I'm saying. So you don't know the fluctuation. You don't know who's gonna come out. So I think you really should take a step back and look at and talk to everyone from every walk of constituency, not just people that you say that you spoke with that say that. There are people I'm pretty sure you didn't get emails from, or shut-ins. I talk to the seniors, I talk to the vets. A lot of them don't come out. I've been to the Legion, and they speak about, but they just don't want to be involved.
Just to say thank you for the time you guys are putting into this. Appreciate it.
Well, and we appreciate that you folks are here, and we appreciate anybody who filled the survey out, anybody who's come to these meetings for the last
2 years.
Yeah, what?
2 2.5 years.
Yes, 2.5 years. And
I just wanted to respond that the reason that, well, I was saying about, I see how little participation there is.
come back next week, okay?
So that's what I'm saying. I'm worried that open town meeting, there's such a lack of interest. Most people who are in my demographic do not know what RTM stands for, who are Brattleboro residents. There are so many Brattleboro residents who say, what's RTM? So that's why I'm saying, I mean, if I don't know, everyone laughed when I said give it another 15 years, I wasn't joking, but this is slow work. And so if people don't even know what RTM is, like, yeah, of course it has some issues and is not working as well as it should work, but representative democracy, all the issues that RTM has are quality issues of a representative democracy. Oh no, who do I vote for? I don't know who this is. Yeah, welcome to a ballot. Democracy is a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of work. In California, I was a voter for 20 years before I moved here, and we vote on propositions. Every single law, all the voters get to decide what laws happen and don't happen in California. It's a lot of work. And so there's a million different ways to do it, but I just think that Brattleboro tends to leap before, like, they think about all the things that will happen.
We've been doing representative town meeting though since 1960 something.
Yeah,
Yeah, 1960.
we've given it
So-
65 years.
Yeah,
But
that's. the
I only
thing.
moved here 6 years ago.
I just had one last comment. Well, actually two. One's totally technical. I did look on the town website, and the links are there for the steering committee survey results, but they haven't been upgraded. It takes you to brattleboro.org and not brattleboro.gov. So whoever does the website, whoever they may be, wherever, those documents are available, I'm sure, but they're not linked properly to the links. You click on and then you get a warning that brattleboro.org is not a site you want to visit. So anyway, that technical thing. And this sort of piggybacks on what you were saying, Christine. But a minute ago, somebody, I don't even remember who, brought up that they didn't use the word elite, but this idea that the RTM somehow knows the issues better. And I just wanted to say, I don't believe that at all. I think it's about commitment, not that the people that are on RTM think they are smarter or they know the issues. It's just about, and this sort of touches a point you made, Christine, that people make that commitment. I get when I get my new calendar as a rep, that goes on there because I have accidentally booked a gig where I was supposed to be in, Williamstown, Mass at 7:30 that night, and then I really regretted it. So now that just is X'd off, major commitment. And I think the issue is commitment, not some kind of knighting that I'm smarter than other people. I think that what makes RTM interesting is that we have people who are masons, people who are teachers, people who are childcare providers, people that are, raise children and, work in the home. There's a variety of people there, and it's not about that we think we're smarter. It's just that and that's what I found in looking at the history of RTM. It was to get that commitment so there would be some consistency. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I don't think it's about elitism. I think we've got farmers on there, we've got environmentalists, we've got people that, work for the town, I believe. We got a wide variety of people. Paras in the school system who really are frontline workers on what's going on in society. And I think that richness of different viewpoints is not about that group being somehow smarter than other people. Anyway, thank you all for having this forum.
So next week, we can figure out what we're doing. And then we'll go from there. Yes. Because we have on our calendar, because we're meeting next week.
Yeah.
And then we meet on June, then like the next week, I think.
2 weeks.
We meet
Yeah.
on
Or 2 weeks, it's either one more week or 2 more weeks.
Yeah. June 29th.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, May 29th.
And
It's-
June 5th,
Yeah,
So it is-
4th. We switched to the
So it is 3
4th.
weeks
oh,
in a
we
row.
switched to the 4th.
Yeah, so we said, Thursday, May 29th.
That's a Thursday?
Wednesday, yeah, next Thursday, week from today, we're meeting at the exact same time. Then we're gonna meet on Wednesday, June 4th,
Yeah.
normally switch,
Yep.
and then Wednesday, June 25th.
Yep.
I don't care how beautiful it is.
So, you know, if we can figure out what we wanna do next week, and then we can sit here and figure it all out.
I don't think we can get this done in time if we don't
And we-
decide next week.
I agree, and then we make our plan and we push forward.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys, thank you.
Thank you.
And then Peter, you and I should be.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, so we
we
should get together and maybe, shoot for that first June meeting, to be able to at least bring our initial thoughts forward about select board to town manager.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And, based on the conversation we had tonight, I think it would be useful for us next week to look at what it might, one example of how we might chop up. These are the things that would be in an open town meeting.
Yeah.
These are the things that don't even need to be decided by the voters.
Exactly.
And these are things that could go onto a ballot.
Yes.
From
We have that comparison chart,
Exactly.
so if we could just really dig down on.
Looking at
this.
that document of,
Yes.
what we've really been dealing with.
Yes.
And break them out into the 3 pieces.
When you guys discuss, your initial thoughts of the select board section,
Mhm.
somebody, yesterday in the caucus meeting, had a question about why there's varying terms, and especially the longest being 3 years. So I know that we had done some comparison, but I don't remember drilling down in that way.
Sure.
There were some questions about like why not even our state representatives are 3 years long. So as you consider the section, if you will
Sure.
keep that in mind.
So are people concerned that 3 years is too long?
Well, person had a question
person.
of why
Okay.
is one length 3 years?
Okay.
We can go, I feel like we discussed that at a meet, I'll try to look through the minutes, cause I'm trying to do that anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty straightforward answer. It doesn't mean it's the one right answer, but do you wanna spend 3 minutes on it now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So, with the staggering, there's always 3 seats coming open, there's always some continuity, there's 2 people continuing.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody could be 1, everybody could be 2, there'd still be staggering of one sort or another, and so,
I did mention that
It's
to
a-
this person,
Yeah.
but it was still just, for the good of the whole, a
Yeah.
question was, how come our state representatives are 2 and we
Right.
have a select board person?
I can answer that too. It's because Vermont does not
Yeah.
have an impeachment rule, so all elected
Yes.
officials are 2-year terms, cause that's how you get them out of office.
And they've always been this move to make the governor a 4-year term.
Right.
But it's always the governor who's in it that wants it 4, and then you get out, you don't want it. I have personal experience.
An impeachment process.
No, I know, Virginia is the same way.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's 1 4-year
Your
term.
term, yeah.
Okay.
So at least it was on the brain of somebody.
Thank you for,
But I feel like we had actually discussed about why having 2-year terms would make it more complicated with the rotation.
well,
Yeah.
it definitely would, and you'd still end up with the, yes.
Yeah.
It would be,
There would be an odd year out,
there would be math
even
involved.
with everybody having 2 years.
Math. We don't want math, no math.
Other ones.
Okay,
Can
so,
I make another
Oh,
suggestion
yeah.
for next week? And that is, can we write out, each of us, sometime before next week and do an email to everybody about what we see happening? No?
no, is that we
Because of the
violate?
open meetings law.
No, not to discuss, but just to say
Well,
what our opinion
Like we
is.
could all, I mean, we could all like send it to staff and have it put in the thing for next week and, but like,
I feel really weird doing
You
that,
feel bad?
Talk about it here.
yeah.
Well,
It's
come
not a bad idea for us to write it down, those of us who have struggled to articulate
That's-
exactly what we're thinking.
that's
But
what I'm
I think we
trying
should share it with each other here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Kind of like a motion or something. If you wanna make a motion.
But I don't know if we know what the motion's gonna be until we all talk to each other.
I still think the motion just needs to be which form of
Yes.
which form of
Annual town
forum, meeting, whatever you want.
Right.
And then the rest of the details will have to be figured out.
Yes, that's what we'll
It seems
start
like we've already landed in a place where we want a town meeting. We want a gathering of people. And we don't know for sure that whether it's gonna be open town meeting or representative town meeting. So that decision we'll make next week. It does feel like you'll want a little more than that to help with drafting in terms of,
Honestly,
This-
even that much I think would be enough to start.
okay,
Because then you could go through and identify what we need to change.
okay.
Yes.
Or at least address,
Yeah.
decide whether or not to change.
Yeah, I mean, and right now I can think of things, if we go open, we have to discuss. You know, it's very
Right.
clear, we'd have to figure out what to do with the Human Services Committee, because that's a committee of representative town meeting.
Right.
You know, and the Finance Committee is a committee of representative town meeting. You know, so there are structural things like that
Yes.
that we're gonna have to think through, and we're gonna get a lot of public input, I think, on at least one of them,
Uh-huh.
if we go a certain way.
Yeah.
You know, so, but you know,
I think just knowing and then being able to go through and even just highlight
Yeah.
everywhere that we still need to discuss.
Mhm.
we can start that.
That we don't need any more than just,
Yes.
is it open or is it RTO?
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then we just, in our own minds, I'm gonna make a list of things that we know are hot button issues and who we're gonna have to get in here to talk about on some of the things, depending on which way. One way, it won't be as hard, the other way, it's not gonna be hard, it's just gonna be reimagining certain things that are done a certain way now, if we go the other way. And I'm thinking specifically Human Services and Finance Committee.
Yeah.
Especially Human
Which could
Services
be
Committee.
They
just
could
the
just
same
be-
as they are
they could
today,
have committees
but
that are
decided
open
by
By
the
the-
open
by-
town meeting.
Right, by
Yeah.
everybody,
So,
we'll know more next week.
Motion to adjourn?
Troy makes a motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.